and welcome to episode 6 of CO-VID Creativity. Again, I am in awe of the talent of my friends. They're incredible. I love them to pieces. I even have 2 of my students appearing in this video, so it's quite exciting. So I really hope you enjoy it. A lot of the content is a little bit abstract, so I hope you delve into your abstract side as well. And yeah, maybe feel a little nostalgia for when you first heard or read or saw these stories. So without further ado, here it is.
Once upon a time there was a prince who desperately wanted to marry a princess, as most princes do. There were princesses enough, but it was difficult to find out whether they were real ones. There was always something about them that was not as it should be. One evening there was a terrible storm, and the prince awoke to see a princess knocking at the glass gates. The water ran down from her hair and clothes. It ran down into the toes of her shoes, and out again at the heels. And yet she kept saying that she was a real princess. "Well, we'll soon find that out," thought the old queen. But she said nothing, went into the bedroom, took all the bedding off the bedstead, and laid a pea on the bottom. Then she took 20 mattresses and laid them on the pea, and then 20 eider-down beds on top of the mattresses. The princess had to lie all night on this mattress. In the morning when she woke, the queen asked her how she'd slept, to which the princess said that she'd slept horribly, because she felt like she'd been lying on something hard, and that she felt it made her body all black and blue. And that's how they knew she was a real princess, because she had felt the pea right through the 20 mattresses and the 20 eider-down beds. Nobody but a real princess could be as sensitive as that. Naturally, the prince wanted to take her as his wife, but the princess thought that he was crazy, because they'd only just met, and she was really just seeking shelter from the crazy storm. She quickly left the prince's castle, and never looked back.
There was once a man and a woman who had a deep yearning for a child. They were neighbours to an enchantress with immense power, whose property was surrounded by a high wall. But behind those walls there was a beautiful garden in which there bloomed a rampion of Rapunzels, and there was nothing that the woman wanted more. She wanted so badly that she grew ill and proclaimed to her husband that if she can't eat some of the rampions, then she will die. Not wanting his wife to die, the man clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampions and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it greedily. The man was off to grab some more when he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," said she with an angry look, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Please have mercy," he stammered in reply. "My wife saw your rampions from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take with you as much rampions as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your father will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower, which lay in a forest, which had neither stairs nor door, but at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress she unfastened her braided tresses. wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked for the door for the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went into the forest to listen to it. Once when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. So the next day, the king's son tried the same thing. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened, but the king's son began to talk her quite like he would to a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had led him to have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, she said yes, but not because she was in love, but because she wanted to explore the world down below. When the enchantress found out about her plans, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice around her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snap, they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, the enchantress fastened the braids of Rapunzel's hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window, and when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let her hair down, and the king's son ascended. But instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "you would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and he leapt down from the tower, falling into which he fell, pierced his eyes. The thorns pierced his eyes, and he wandered blind about the forest and did naught but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Rapunzel eventually found her way out of the desert and managed to stand up to the enchantress. She did end up finding the prince again, but by that time she had learned to love someone else more, herself.
Far out in the deep blue ocean dwelled the Sea King and his subjects in a castle that had walls built of coral and a roof built from shells. The Sea King had been a widower for a number of years, and so his mother looked after her 6 beautiful granddaughters, and this is the story of her youngest granddaughter, the Little Mermaid. She was the prettiest of them all. Her skin was as delicate as a rose leaf, her eyes as blue as the deepest sea, and like all of her sisters, her body ended in a fish's tail. She cared for nothing more than the beautiful marble statue of a handsome boy which had fallen to the bottom of the sea. Nothing gave her so much pleasure as to hear about the world above the sea. She made her old grandmother tell her all she knew of the ships and of the towns, the people and the animals. Her grandmother told her that when she turned 15, she could rise up out of the sea to sit on the rocks in the moonlight while the great ships are sailing by, and then you will see both forests and towns. The Little Mermaid waited and waited until finally her 15th birthday arrived, and when she was finally allowed to raise her head above the waters, The clouds were tinted with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight beamed the evening star in all its beauty. It was then that she saw a large ship laying becalmed on the water, with only one sail set. On it she saw a beautiful young prince who was celebrating his 16th birthday. Suddenly the waves rose mountains high. The ship groaned and creaked, and it gave way under the lashes of the sea. She saw the prince sink into the deep waves, and she was glad, for she thought he would now be with her. And then she remembered that human beings could not live in the water, so that when he got down to her father's palace, he would be quite dead. So she brought him back to the surface. In the morning, the storm had ceased, and the sun rose up red and glowing from the water, and its beams brought back the hue of health to the prince's cheeks, but his eyes remained closed. The mermaid kissed his high, smooth forehead, and stroked back his wet hair, and wished that he might live. When people started arriving on the beach, she swam back into the ocean and watched from there as the prince came to life, not knowing that it was she who saved him. She decided to visit the sorceress of the sea, who lived in a place where neither flowers nor grass grew there. Nothing but bare, grey, sandy ground stretched out to the whirlpool, where the water, like foaming mill wells, whirled round everything that it seized, and cast it into the fathomless deep. The little mermaid was so alarmed at what she saw that she stood still, and her heart beat with fear, and she was very nearly turning back. But she thought of the prince, and of the human soul from which she longed, and her courage returned.
"I know what you want,"
said the sea witch.
"It is very stupid of you, but you shall have your way, and it will bring you to sorrow, my pretty princess. I will prepare a draught for you, with which you must swim to land tomorrow before sunrise, and sit down on the shore and drink it. Once your shape has become like a human being, you can no more be a mermaid. You will never return through the water to your sisters or to your father's palace again, and if you do not win the love of the prince, so that he is willing to forget his father and mother for your sake, and to love you with his whole soul, and allow the priest to join your hands that you may be man and wife, then you will never have an immortal soul. The first morning after he marries another, your heart will break, and you will become foam on the crest of the waves. But in exchange for all of this, I'd like your voice."
The little mermaid decided to do it, and suddenly she started to rise up to the shore, found the prince, who was enchanted by her, but he didn't wish to marry her. He was still looking for the mermaid that had rescued him, and how could she tell him that mermaid was her when she didn't have her voice or her tail? He decided that a neighbouring bride had rescued him, and decided to marry her instead, and the little mermaid, though her heart was heavy, started to realize that maybe this prince wasn't as beautiful and caring as she'd imagined, and that she deserved someone that loved her for who she was. She started to love herself, and it was because of that she didn't end up dying, like the sea witch had told her, but instead found her tail reappearing and found herself back in her grandmother's arms, under the sea.
Once upon a time, there was a poor woodcutter that lived in a forest with his wife and 2 children. A boy called Hansel and a girl called Gretel, with their ears stuck to their bedroom doors, they heard their father say that he was worried about how they would be able to feed themselves and the children with the little money that they had. To which their stepmother replied, "Early tomorrow morning we will take the two children out into the thickest part of the woods. Make a fire for them and give each of them a little piece of bread, then leave them by themselves. They will not find their way back home, and they will be rid of them." "I will not do that," replied the father. "How could I bring myself to abandon my own children in the woods? Wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." Gretel cried bitter tears and said to Hansel,
"We're gonna die."
"Oh, don't worry, my sweet sister. I have a plan."
As soon as the adults had fallen asleep, Hansel got up out of bed and put his jacket on and crept outside. The moon was shining brightly and the pink petals in front of the house were glistening like silver coins. Hansel put as many of them as he could fit into his pockets and went back to bed.
Wake up, Gretel. Come on. I'll be there. Don't worry, my sister. I have a plan. Now, try to get some sleep, okay? We have a big day tomorrow. Night.
Before sunrise, their stepmom came to wake them up to tell them they were going to the woods. "Get up, lazy bones, we're leaving in 5 minutes."
Yes, mother, yes. Jacket. Oh. Ooh. Come over here. Okay, leave. Ooh. Let's go.
She gave them a small piece of bread.
We're ready, mother. No, that's for the kids.
Oh yes, for the spoiled brats.
Kids, we're going to the forest so I can chop some wood. Come on, don't be late. Come on. Oh, I hate the forest. Finally, you've made it, kids. Me and your mother want you two to go and find some firewood so we can build you a fire. We'll be back soon. Mother, Father, we're back with the firewood like you wanted.
Here you go. Okay, thank you. Me and your father are just gonna make your fire.
It's a good fire.
There you go. That should keep you warm.
We'll be back soon. Bye. Looks like the fire's run out. Couldn't find any more wood. And it's getting darker. We should probably try to find our way home. Yeah. I think Mother and Father went this way.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think they're coming back. Oh, it's so cold. Oh look, here are the petals that I left behind. Let's follow these. Oh, yes. Cool, keep them going. Oh, yes, that one. That one. Lola, I think it's this way. Come on, Gretel. That one. Come on. That one. Here's another one. Here's another one.
It went exactly like what they'd overheard their dad and stepmother talk about. However, they were able to find their way home because of the pebbles Hansel had dropped from his pocket. As they'd been walking, their father was overjoyed when he saw his children once more, for he had not wanted to leave them alone. Their stepmother was not so much. How did they get home? Hansel, Gretel, in your bedrooms now!
Yes, Mother.
Like the night before, Hansel and Gretel could hear their conversations through the door, and just like the night before, Hansel stocked up on petals. The next day, their stepmother took them deeper into the woods than they had ever been in their whole lifetime. Once again, a large fire was made. Their father and stepmother left them there. The children fell asleep, and when they woke up, it was evening again.
Oh, it's so much colder than yesterday, and the wind really picked up. And yet again, the fire's gone out and it's getting dark.
You should probably find the petals and head home.
Yeah. Come on. Except, I think I saw a couple of petals over here, so let's go this way this time. Ugh. Oh, I can't see any petals.
Me neither. I'm pretty sure it was this way.
Yeah. They must be blown away.
But they could not find their way. They walked through the entire night and day, from morning until evening, but they did not find their way out of the woods. They were terribly hungry, and for they had eaten was only a few small berries that were growing on the ground. It was already the third day since they had left the father's house, when they came across a little house. It was built entirely from bread, with a roof made of cake, and the windows were made of a clear sugar. Hansel reached and broke off a little bit of the roof to see how it tasted, while Gretel stood next to the window panes and was nibbling at them. Suddenly, the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills and leaning on a crutch came creeping out.
Yeah, must be up here in the house. Me too. Can't believe we ate our last piece of bread. Gretel, I think we're lost. I'm so hungry.
Look here.
Wait, what's this place?
Where are we?
It's a candy house. Yum. So good.
What's all that? Kids! Despite her frightening appearance, the old woman kindly took them by the hand and led them into her house. Then she served them a good meal and made 2 nice beds for them, which the siblings immediately fell asleep on, thinking they were in heaven.
Gretel, okay, you stay here with the tummy ache. I'll go and ask her what's happening. Coming! Hello, my name's Hansel.
Hi, Hansel. I am Billy.
Oh, hi, Billy. My sister's outside. She's a bit of a tummy ache.
Okay, that's...
Okay. Yeah.
It's getting cold and dark. Would you like to...
Oh, stay here the night? Okay, well, I'll go and get my sister. Okay? And then we'll do it.
Okay.
Wow, let me take my jacket off. That's better. Gretel, come on. This nice lady said we can stay with her tonight. Come on. In this room.
Get up, sweetie. Sweetie, hello.
Oh.
Morning. Where's your brother?
I think he just went for a little walk.
Go for a walk! Come with me now. Come on. Come on. Come on. Out this door now. What?
Why are you like this? I thought that you were nice, thinking they were in heaven. But the old woman had only pretended to be friendly. She was a wicked witch who was lying in wait there for children. She had built her house of bread only in order to lure them to her. And if she captured one, she would kill him, cook him, and eat him. So she grabbed Hansel with her withered hand and carried him to a little stall where she locked him behind a cage. Oh, who ever said anything about me being nice? He is locked outside in the stall and is going to be fattened up. When he is fat, I'm going to eat him. Gretel began to cry, but it was all for nothing. She had to do what the witch demanded. Every morning, the old woman crept out to the stall and shouted, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I can feel if you are fat yet." But Hansel stuck out a little bone, and the old woman, who had bad eyes and could not see the bone, thought it was Hansel's finger, and she wondered why he didn't get fat.
Once upon a time there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her. But the person that loved her the most of all was her grandmother. The grandmother gave her granddaughter a cape of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else, and thus came the name Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother, she is ill and weak. They will do her good. Make sure you stay on the path." Little Red Riding Hood nodded and went on her way. As soon as she entered the wood, she was greeted by a wolf. Little Red Riding Hood did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," said he. "Where are you going so early?" "To my grandmother's." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" asked the wolf. "Her house stands under the 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below. You surely must know it." The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature. What a nice plump mouthful. She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily, so as to catch them both." Thus he said, "Aren't the flowers pretty out here, Little Red Riding Hood? Why do you not look round? You walk gravely along as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Red Riding Hood raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, "Suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay." So she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers. And whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one farther on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door, convinced Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother that he was Little Red Riding Hood, went inside and devoured grandmother in one gulp. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid himself in bed, and drew the curtains. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house, much later in the afternoon, she was surprised to find the cottage door standing open, and when she went into the room she had a strange feeling. She knocked on the door and said, "Good morning," but she received no answer. She drew back the curtains and saw her grandmother laying with her cap pulled far over her face and looking very strange. She said, "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have!" "The better to hear you with, my child," said the wolf. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have!" she said. "The better to see you with, my dear," said the wolf. "But grandmother, what large hands you have!" "The better to hug you with," said the wolf. "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have!" "All the better to eat you with," and the wolf swallowed Little Red Riding Hood whole. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was just passing the house, and thought to himself, "How the old woman is snoring! I might just see if she wants anything." So he went into the room, and when he came back to the bed, he saw that the wolf was lying in it. He was about to kill the wolf, when the thought occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she might still be saved. He found a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. He managed to rescue both Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, as well as place some great stones into the wolf's body. This meant that when he woke up and he tried to run away, his stomach was so heavy that he collapsed at once and died, much to their delight. And Little Red Riding Hood thought to herself, "I will never by myself leave the path to run into the wood when my mother has forbidden me to do so." The next time Little Red Riding Hood went to visit her grandmother, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her from the path. Little Red Riding Hood was on her guard and went straight forward on her way and told her grandmother that she had met the wolf and was certain he had followed her. Soon afterwards the wolf knocked and cried, "Open the door, grandmother! I am Little Red Riding Hood, and I am bringing you some cakes." But they did not speak or open the door, so the wolf decided to sit down and wait until Little Red Riding Hood went home in the evening. But the grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. So she asked Little Red Riding Hood to carry a trough which smelt of sausages to the front of the house. The smell was so strong that the wolf leaned so far into the trough that he fell into it and drowned. Little Red Riding Hood went joyously home, and no one ever did anything to harm her again.
Once upon a time there was a poor widow who had only a son named Jack and a cow named Milky White. And all they had to live on was the milk the cow gave every morning, which they carried to the market and sold. But one morning Milky White gave no milk, and they didn't know what to do. So Jack said to his mother,
"Cheer up, Mother. I'll go get work somewhere."
He took the cow's halter in his hand and off he started. He hadn't gone far when he met a funny-looking old man to whom he sold Milky White for a bag of magical beans. When he came home that night, his mother was furious, threw the beans out of the window and didn't get Jack any supper. When Jack woke up the next morning and looked out of his bedroom window, he saw that the beans his mother had thrown out into the garden had sprung up into a big beanstalk which went up until it reached the sky. So naturally, Jack started climbing up the beanstalk until he came across a very tall house and a very tall woman who gave him some breakfast. She warned him about her ogre husband and how he loves to devour young boys his size. But her warning came too late, as Jack could hear the giant's thundering footsteps and his loud cry of
Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he far or be he near, I'll grind his bones to make my beer.
So Jack hid and waited until the ogre had left, and placing a bag of gold under his arm, he climbed back down the beanstalk and showed it to his mother, who apologized for how she had treated him before. They lived on the bag of gold for as long as they could, and when it ran out, Jack climbed back up the beanstalk and went back to visit the ogre and his wife, and this time stole the ogre's hen that lay golden eggs. But still he wanted more. So he climbed back up and was about to steal the ogre's golden harp when the giant caught sight of him and started chasing him down the beanstalk. When he reached the bottom, Jack called out,
Mother, bring me an axe, bring me an axe.
And his mother came rushing out with the axe in her hand. For there she saw the ogre with his legs just through the clouds. But Jack jumped down and got hold of the axe and gave a chop at the beanstalk. The ogre felt the beanstalk shake and quiver. Then Jack gave another chop with the axe, and the ogre fell down and broke his crown, and the beanstalk came toppling after. Jack and his mother became handsomely rich. But he didn't marry a princess, because he realized that he didn't need to marry a princess to be happy.
It was a lovely summer day in the country, when a mother duck was sitting on her nest, waiting for her broods to hatch. Suddenly, one shell cracked, then another, and another, until there was only one egg that had not hatched yet. When it did finally hatch, the duckling was large and ugly, and everyone nicknamed her the Ugly Duckling, and teased her about her appearance. All of her brothers and sisters were unkind to her. The ducks pecked at her, the chickens bit her, and a human girl kicked her with her feet. The ugly duckling flew away until she reached a large moor inhabited by wild ducks. But they were mean to her also, so she hid from them as best as she could. Suddenly she heard gunshots in the sky, and she saw a dog running towards her. Thankfully, she was so ugly that the dog was too scared to bite her. In the evening, she took off until she reached a poor little cottage that seemed ready to fall, but it provided a shelter for the night. When she was discovered the next morning, she found that a woman, a tomcat, and a hen lived in this cottage. The woman's eyesight was not very good, and she thought the duckling must be a fat duck that had strayed from home. Therefore the ugly duckling had to continue her flight. Autumn came, and the leaves in the forest turned to orange and gold. Then, as winter approached, the wind caught them as they fell, and whirled them in the cold air. The clouds, heavy with hail and snowflakes, hung low in the sky, and all of this was very sad for the poor little duckling. One evening, just as the sun set amid radiant clouds, there came a large flock of beautiful birds out of the bushes. The duckling had never seen any like them before. They were swans, and they curved their graceful necks while their soft plumage shone with dazzling whiteness. They uttered a singular cry as they spread their glorious wings and flew away from those cold regions to warmer countries across the sea. The ugly duckling whirled herself in the water like a wheel, stretched out her neck towards them. and uttered a cry so strange that it frightened herself. She knew not the names of these birds, nor where they had flown, but she felt towards them as she had never felt for any other bird in the world. She was not envious of these beautiful creatures, but wished to be as lovely as them. The winter grew colder and colder. She was obliged to swim about on the water to keep it from freezing, but every night the space on which she swam became smaller and smaller. At last she became exhausted and lay still and helpless, frozen fast in the ice. Early in the morning, a peasant who was passing by saw what had happened. He broke the ice in pieces with his wooden shoe and carried the duckling home to his wife. The warmth revived the poor little creature, but when the children wanted to play with her, the duckling thought they would do her some harm, so she started up in terror. The door stood open. The poor creature could just manage to slip out amongst the bushes and lay down, quite exhausted, in the newly fallen snow. The ugly duckling found herself lying one morning in a moor amongst the rushes. She felt the warm sun shining, and heard the larks singing, and saw that all around was beautiful spring. Then the young bird felt that her wings were strong. She flapped them against her sides and rose high into the air. They bore her onwards, until she found herself in a large garden, before she well knew how it happened, and where there were 3 beautiful white swans rustling their feathers and swimming lightly over the smooth water. The duckling remembered the lovely birds and felt more strangely unhappy than ever. The moment they espied the stranger, they rushed to meet her with outstretched wings. Thinking they would call her, the ugly duckling bent her head down to the surface of the water and awaited death. It was in that moment that she saw that she was no longer a dark, grey bird that was ugly and disagreeable to look at, but instead a graceful and beautiful swan. She now felt glad at having suffered sorrow and trouble, because it enabled her to feel such happiness now, as the old swans bowed their heads before her. She had never dreamt of such happiness as this while she was an ugly duckling.